So I would like to give the floor to Francesco Paulicelli.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this time. So late. Where are you calling from? From Lecce? Good. Can you tell us, okay, if you have a presentation, if you can please share your screen with us, because we need a few seconds to be able to see it. So first of all, I started with this assumption. I've been working in this field, data field, for many years, but this doesn't mean being an expert in everything that happens in the world. So when the coronavirus started in Italy, straight afterwards, it looked to me like it was a miracle that the civil protection and the ministries provided data. But the problem is that this data, published by the Civil Protection every day in Borelli's press conference, are very important for us, but for citizens, it's almost impossible to interpret this data. Of course, it's a very big problem to understand this data. So basically, understanding hospitalizations as compared to intensive treatment cases, well, that's a different thing. And there are columns that are not just communicating enough what's going on in Italy or what do we have to do in Italy to prevent the problem or to solve the problem. Are we getting out of the bad situation or so? However, this data is reliable data, but since they're not interpretable, not easy to understand, I decided to create a map with this data. So the map you can see now is the progressive map for the infection over time in Italy. So it tends to red because it's progressive. But if you look at the daily new cases, you can see different colors. And if you look at it in 10 days' time, you will see that the colors will be less dark, a little bit lighter, because this phenomenon is going down in several areas. So you don't just need a picture, you need pictograms, one after the other. And I had fun putting them together, the data, of course, in order to get this maps so that we can get an evolution over time of the COVID-19 evolution. This was April 7th, for instance, and you can notice there's a trend inversion, a trend change. But the main problem about the coronavirus is incoming data, so the tests basically, because they really depend on the regions. In Veneto, they are doing tests for frogs as well, for anybody really, but there are the regions where tests are not being performed. So this data is not that reliable. And on the other hand, data we can count is the number of deaths. So the death rate, for instance, is something you can also see on the map, and there's a lethality and death rate. These are two different rates. Lethality rate is the number of deaths out of the total cases, and the death case is the number of deaths out of the population. So the data is not always reliable, but what remains is the deaths compared to the population, which makes it possible for you to make a comparison with previous years, with other years. So, for instance, in Bergamo, there was a study that was carried out, and you can see that 50 people would die every day, and here we've got over 500. So this is the incidence of coronavirus in Matera, Basilicata, and the country. We've got less death cases due to coronavirus if compared to the previous year. So in the end, when we will assess the health consequences of coronavirus, we will see also the data related with intensive treatment. So, for instance, these are data for December 31st. So in Puglia, there's about 27% of hospital beds engaged. And therefore, the situation is a little bit better than Lombardy, where 150% of the beds were already engaged at that time. This map is available on my blog and is for free. It's a non-profit initiative, and it has about 2 million visualizations, and was spread throughout the world because it was also mentioned by the World Health Organization. I did it in order to devote some time to my country, to give some time to my country, and also to keep the situation under control. And I came out with infographics too, based on the epidemiologist's invitation, because they asked me, please check the death number, the positive cases, the death rate per region. This is the number, for instance, the death rate. So in Lombardy, for instance, you have 9 deaths out of 10,000. In Sicily, you've got 2.5. So that's the big difference, 10 and 2. So Lombardy has 5 times more deaths than other regions, like Sicily, for instance. You can calculate an average for Italy. You can calculate what's happening averagely in Italy in the different regions. Regions are doing better and regions are doing worse. But these numbers make it possible for us to understand whether the big sacrifice we're doing is worthwhile or not. You can do it per region, you can do it per tests, you can do it per R0, for instance. This is a number that was renowned a few days ago. It's the infection rate. One person can infect 2 people averagely, but it's less than 1. It's 0.58, which means we are getting out of the pandemic phase and we will enter the endemic phase. When will this happen? This is already happening because we've got a downward trend, but the COVID intensive treatment number will decrease. So basically people getting into the hospital with complications will be less serious in terms of cases. But this is something we will see in 15 days' time. Now we're seeing a downturn, and this gives us hope because by the end of April we will get out of the critical stage, which means the problem is not solved, but we can be a bit more relaxed, because if we do get together again, we can go for a second peak. So once again, this map is visited lots of times. Sometimes I can't open my server because half Italy is been watching my map. But from time to time, I can improve it, and it's a service I'm offering to my country. The Civil Protection called me a few days ago to thank me, and I'm proud of it. So it would be vital to develop critical thinking, because in Italy we do believe any number we're told, anything we're told. No, we need to think critically. We need to look for the sources, newspapers, and if we're not able to, we can get help from the ones who can do it. It's like reading classic texts or Latin texts. Because 47% of the Italians are just reading the headlines of newspapers. They stop there. They don't read any further. This is something we can change. Thank you very much. Your presentation was very interesting, because we, of course, need some more education. We don't need to stop to limit ourselves to appearance or to the easy things. We need to work, and when we will resume working normally, we need a new model, economic and social model, possibly also an education model. Thank you very much for your work. Thank you very much, and see you soon.